Hi, everyone. Please subscribe to the channel. Thank you. All right, we're back. Hi, Linda. Haven't seen
Hi
you in a
there,
while.
my friend. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing great. I'm enjoying spring because where I live, the winter is long, not super cold, but it rains and rains and rains. So it's nice to, see everything bloom and also to get more sun, basically. So it's been good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's nice. You go with your wife. I never had a husband that came with me shopping. Never.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that
But
can
I
be.
know a lot of men that go with their wife shopping. Is it because you want to make sure they're not overspending or?
No, well, it's the food shopping weekly trip. I don't go shopping with her for other things.
Oh, no,
Food
well,
is
no,
yeah,
not food at all. And then I took my kids because I always felt guilty because they were so thrilled to go to the grocery store. It's like a big deal, a big outing.
yeah. Well,
And they wanted that junk crap that was up there from China.
yeah, that's really that was really the thinking they were setting you up. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, that junk crap from China that is now all of a sudden going to be getting more expensive. I mean, I was really amazed to hear, this guy, our president. I really think he's losing his edge
Yeah.
because I'm pretty sure, I mean, he's a total scoundrel and a liar. But I years ago in his first term, he never would have replied to that guy that asked him, "Hey, like, what about the containers at the ports? They're, you know, they're sitting there, and now people are going to lose their jobs." And he goes, "Well, yeah, but that's going to mean we're spending less money, so that's good." And I thought, "What? You don't say that. That's
Or
crazy."
you can't
Because
put food on the table for your family
of
because you're
course, I
not able
mean,
to work.
like it's almost like he's just focused on what he thinks he's saving somewhere for some mysterious, what he thinks is the government. Um, so that's one of the many markers, that I think aren't going exactly well. Especially like, so far, we're part of the way in. Each month that passes, it's going to show itself more and more in the economy, and people's
It's
jobs.
going to get worse. I do
Yeah,
those prediction decks and everything. Everything is saying, it's not necessarily Armageddon, but it's definitely fasten that buckle because it's going to be tough. I got so many canned goods right now.
you're actually preparing for.
Yeah, but nobody will eat it. I got
Yeah,
all those
well,
canned goods and my kids won't eat it.
and then there are many canned goods that are packed really well and everything, without too many, without chemicals and special
Right.
line or
I
something.
have the
So,
emergency stuff too, the big cans.
mm,
But I heard the taste isn't that good, but that's for like Armageddon type
yeah,
stuff.
that's if you have to survive. Yeah.
My mother-in-law from my first husband, she was he her husband, my husband's father was Russian and the mom was Polish. And the father left her and the 12 kids in Ohio when he inherited $1 million that the parents were his parents were bootleggers during the Depression. And
Mm,
they died with 3 million and each child got 1 million. And he took off.
mm.
And she would shop when I went there to visit them at their house with him. Um, she only had a couple of the kids still living at the house, but she would get those big tin cans of peanut butter. I mean, the huge tin cans of peanut butter. She didn't know how to shop less.
Like she would have loved Costco.
Yeah, she would have loved Costco.
Costco,
Yeah.
you can't buy one of it anything. It has to be like preparation
Oh,
for
I
preparation
always
for war.
overspend at Costco. Yep. And I give to my cleaning lady because she's so sweet. And I'm always got too much. She takes it too. Hey, his mother, God bless her heart, her name was Betty. She went on Queen for a Day. Do you remember that show, Queen for a Day?
No.
It was a show, black and white, back in the day in the 60s, that women would go up there and give their sad story. And then whoever won would get, the new washer and dryer, whatever it was they were wishing for. She was on that show and lost. Oh, it was
Oh
so,
well.
so pathetic.
here we are, by the way. We talked with each other about how we were going to talk about the Pope, but like the moon right now is really, really late in Libra. It's void, of course. And the moon, when it's void, you set a target and then you start doing something else.
Yeah.
On a tangent. Yeah. So, okay, let's try to get back a little bit on track. So the Pope, okay, but before that, wait, another tangent. Something I just saw this morning. Trump's economic approval rating, 36%. This is the guy that was supposed to be
Thank you.
and this is now before, right now it's just anxiety about where things are going. Wait till we actually see some of the problems, right? With it. And yeah, and I noticed in the Times, now turning to the Pope, that the line, and this is curious because the New York Times, they always try to be, more neutral, even though you kind of know they're trying to tell you what the truth is, which is often at least a little left of center, which is why Trump hates them. But the line says, Pontiff may provide contrast to Trump in U.S. values. Well, obviously, that's what that means, but really he's the polar opposite. He's Trump's is like the what's in it for me mentality,
Yeah.
which is the whole MAGA playbook, and like people like Lara Loomer, oh, he's a Marxist, woke Pope, and he's going to take away our, like, what's he taking away exactly? He's just like,
Not doing anything to you.
no. And the other thing, I heard these other two discussing it, and I laughed because they were saying sometimes the MAGA people are funny, like they're expecting a Pope to come in. This Pope is going to be saying, yeah, take them to El Salvador and lock them up. And obviously, what Catholic Pope is going to do that? The most you would get, I think this is what upset people like Steve Bannon, who, even though he's another, MAGAist and another scoundrel, he wanted a Pope that would at least not talk too much and just, kind of do like a conservative thing. But that's not what they're getting because this guy already has talked. And he'll probably talk more because you see
He
that.
will talk more because he's got Virgo, 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 Virgo.
Yeah, and Virgo is not good for Trump because that's in the place that kind of like Virgo Pisces is Saturn is in Pisces now. That's why Trump made that touch the third rail. He went in and the tariff thing is a classic big Saturn mistake, but it's driven by the fact that together with that he's on a major Jupiter cycle, so he's way overconfident. He's got this idea that he's got it all
Remember,
together.
the people around him are feeding him. I'm telling you, a lot of like that, let's get rid of habeas corpus. That's all Steve Miller.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Steve Miller talking in his ear.
Yeah. Although, if Trump is happy with it, otherwise he would never.
I don't think he knows what habeas corpus means.
No, that's sure. He'll probably never use those words because it'd be, he won't.
So
remember
you
them.
did a little video where you talked a little bit about his chart, about Pope Leo the 14th chart. And I was telling you, and I just did a little video that just went up, not very long, but I wanted to tell, first of all, my guys will come to me and tell me to shut up. They do that every once in a while because they're saying sometimes I talk too much. And they said, listen, breathe. Don't constantly run on what you're picking up. Digest it, allow. And they have to, I don't know, that's part of my Virgo or what, but I got this. Well, that's what happened to me yesterday. And they were telling me, like they told me to stop talking trash about Trump as much as I hated that. But they said that doesn't do the world any good, doesn't do you good, me good. We can critique, but we can't condemn as much as we'd like to. So then they said, I saw Pope Francis. And he was young and he was running around. He was almost doing a jig. And he said, Linda, this was as prophesied. This is the man that was supposed to be Pope. They all had a journey, but this particular Pope has a big journey. And also, St. Michael, who I've seen before, came in. And did you know Pope Leo the 13th was the one who did the prayer to St. Michael? And that I didn't know that. I was telling my friend who's Catholic, And St. Michael was here and he said, Linda, do you know Pope Leo was the one who did the prayer? I said, no. Well, that makes sense while he's there. But there's a battle to be fought. There's a battle to be fought. And Leo will be assisted, and there might even be some attempts on his life, is what I heard. But he won't get killed because he's protected. But it's like he's going to go against evil, and it's going to be a tough battle. So we all need to energetically put ourselves at a higher vibration, do a lot of prayers and help.
Yeah, that sounds like good guidance. He's Virgo, and he's, it's curious that was Sagittarius, but in degrees they align with his Virgo degrees. Like, in other words, that's why Francis and Trump had some really harsh exchanges back in the day. Remember, he called them disgraceful. There was this whole period because Francis is at odds with Trump's chart for sure. He opposes his son. It's right in there. And this guy, same way, just in a different part of the chart, but connected to the American most elevated chart or planet, Neptune. And Neptune, Pope like this, it's pretty obvious. He's not doing Neptune scoundrel energy the way Trump does Neptune. He's doing true spiritual energy, right? So he's up there representing the highest values of that planet in the American chart. And the thing is, America is a mix of really good people and really terrible people. It's a true melting pot. And we happen to be in, like, part of the thing that people have to realize is we are in a zone right now, these years, the whole world is. There's a major realignment happening, right? So in a way, Trump is just a vehicle for, and you should be thankful that he's not a very smart man. It's actually an advantage. If you had a real, true, totally awake and dangerous person, that would be much, much worse.
Yes.
This guy.
That's why when people say he's Satan, I say, nah, he's not that. Satan has got some wiseness to it. That energy is evil, but it's not Satan. He listens to everybody.
Yeah, no, and it's getting worse. I don't know if you've noticed that recently they'll ask him something. Hey, what about this? And he says, oh, I did it because Bobby, he means RFK, Bobby said it was a good idea. Or, no, I don't know what that is. Go talk to the head of whatever department. So this guy, that's the other thing. He's a slacker. All he likes to do is play golf, then BS his way through. And he is very good at talking. And people think he's good at doing, but where is he doing?
He was talking about coming up with he helped Pakistan and India come to an agreement this morning. And I said, wait a second, you don't even get up till noon. What do you mean you help? They're saying, he's lying.
It's an idea that came to his head on the seventh hole. I'll tell people that I was talking to the.
But do you when you look at his chart, can you see something like he was meant to be here? I don't see him as the second coming of Christ, nothing like that.
No.
But I see his ability to create some sort of well-being as very strong.
You mean the Pope?
The Pope.
Yeah, no, the Pope, the Pope for sure. The Pope is it times both for sure the American chart, because really this whole moment in the world, a lot of it is the American crisis, with it's the point in time where it throws the world into chaos at the moment. But yeah, for sure, it's I would say you look at I don't know his birth time yet. I'm hoping that someone will find it, though that could be tricky. But if it's found, that'll give more information. But as it is, I think it's great that he's representing that point in the American chart for sure. And and it's interesting that Trump's core energy is on the American Mars, which makes total sense because it's all anger and anger, fighting, retribution. This guy is representing the spiritual energy, which is going to counter that because he's going to be speaking to to it and saying, how can this be, like what he said to Vance? What do you mean that only the people here count? All the people count,
Yeah, Jesus never said that.
So these people are really crazy. Now, the other thing is, too, that, remember what I was telling you that, and I'm trying to wonder why this happened, many reasons, but he got 15 more points out of the Catholics in this recent election, because Biden and him were tied, right? A lot of Catholics voted for him, but this creates a wedge because, first, the Catholics that voted are probably looking and going, well, this isn't too good to be whisking people off the street and putting them in without evidence and things like that. And now along comes the Pope, who's Catholic, who, because Francis wasn't talking as much. He probably was getting really old. He wasn't getting into the fray like he did a few years ago.
But
This
I'll
guy's
tell
more
you, if
likely.
you see a picture of Pope Francis standing next to Trump,
He's
I
not
mean,
happy.
that guy, his face gave him away. You couldn't stand him.
Well, how could he?
He
Frankly,
was
how
like,
could he?
it was like the smell. You could smell it from here.
Yeah, that might have been it too.
So that's interesting. Yeah. Well, the Pope was getting old and it was getting hard for him, but this guy's going to fight the battle. But I don't see him, as a Virgo, I know a lot of Virgo men. And one thing about a Virgo man, they can outplay you and they will take their time doing it. They don't have to be like in your face. They'll just wait for you to do something and tear you up.
Yeah, no, that's and he has enough. Like, it's what happens in charts is that you're a sign. He's got a lot of Virgo for sure, but then there are other planets, and a really key planet is he's got Jupiter and Leo, and that automatically gives confidence, right? Which is a very good counterpoint because if it's all Virgo, maybe it's a little too compliant.
He'd be a little shy. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think. Yeah, I
Do I
think it's
have Jupiter and Leo?
no. You have Jupiter in
Okay.
Gemini. You have a you have um, you have Mars, Pluto. You have planets in Leo. No, don't worry. Your
Okay.
Leo, your Leo is well populated. Yeah,
Okay.
that's why you there's that. I thought it was that thing of you doing stand-up comedy. That's Leo.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I got a big ass head. Usually Leos have big ass
Yeah,
heads.
like a lion, right? Yeah, no, but for confidence, right? Like when you think, right? Barack Obama and Bill Clinton are both Leos,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It's a very it's a strong sign for leadership because it's the sign of the sun and it shows up. I mean, even the current, the Orange Menace has Leo rising. So does J.D. Vance. Like Leo is a very even Giuliani, but they're misusing it because Leo, the sun is either radiant confidence for the good of the world, or it's for your ego, for you yourself, to make a
Right.
display, right? Yeah. So yeah. So bottom line, I think with this is the other thing about you're watching a political situation, you notice that Trump comes in to power, and one of the worries, which would have been totally justified, was people are seeing, some trouble in Europe. There's a kind of a tilt going in that direction, right-wing thinking. But then what happens? Canada was ready to elect a conservative. They elect a liberal as a reaction. In fact, he ran. He ran explicitly saying, I don't like this guy and we're not going to be friends. And the other guy couldn't say that because he had his MAGA supporters in Canada. So he couldn't attack Trump. So that cost him that election. Then Australia does the same thing. They were about to
Wow.
elect, right? And
Yes.
now
And
you
and
want
the guy who ran lost his seat.
exactly the guy in Canada. And in Australia, they got the liberal government. And now the Pope, they were hoping, Steve Bannon openly said, oh, we're worried about this guy, this Provost guy. What if they elect him? Because he's progressive, right? They wanted a kind of a strict, like the Pope before Francis, right? Who was really
Yeah.
kind of,
By
but
the book.
remember that part of the reason that guy left was because of all those scandals they were trying to.
I know,
So,
and
you
there's
know,
that's the hard part too, because a lot of people don't respect the Catholic Church. A lot of people tease about being a recovered Catholic because of all the damage they did. But big organizations, including the Mormons and all of them, they tend to get very scandalous. But I see him doing some healing. So I don't know what that means, but I
well,
feel healing within the
no,
organization.
and I'm hoping that when I look at the big potential of his chart, right, there's a really, you know, what's the word for this? It's like you're using, it's a big change agent. He's got that planetoid that bumped Pluto out of the order, right? So in other words, I'm hoping this guy will start bring women into the conversation. The
Oh,
Catholic
I think
Church,
he will. Yes.
it has no future until it realizes, you got to include both genders and just get out of that whole patriarchal thing because
Yes.
that keeps it, stuck in the
And
past.
also this the priests not being able to be married. They need to do something. They were thinking about it because they need priests really bad.
Yeah.
That was brought on by another pope centuries ago. He said, no, we don't want the pope's property to go to the wife and kids. We want it.
Oh, that's so spiritual, huh?
Very scary. That was God talking to him.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the infallibility. Yeah, exactly. So I think bottom line, I that's why I was telling you I count it as the third major setback, in terms of events reflecting, back to this group of people, and the Trump and his cronies, right?
Right.
Um, I also heard. I don't know if you heard this news. I don't know how much veracity there is to it yet, but this thing with how, first of all, Hegseth can't get out of one bad news cycle after another. Every time we turn around,
Yes.
there's another one. Now that makes sense because his chart is in a big jam and it continues to be off and on till at least next spring. And the way he plays, it's hard for it not to get worse. Let's just say that, right? Because he's
Right.
so out to lunch. But I heard that someone saying that the White House itself, like the group around them and him, they don't like him either, and they're looking at who to put in there. And apparently, they were talking about Jodi Ernst as a possibility. Now she's way more normal,
Way more
which,
normal.
yeah, which would actually that would be that would be helpful as far as being a little less worried that some guy running the army, is going to do something really stupid because she's actually ex-army too. So she would be a really
Because I heard while I was doing my show just before you, I saw the White House or Trump telling Hedgehog,
stop talking.
stop talking,
Yeah.
stop being on Fox News. Because remember, he was everywhere. They're telling him to be quiet. So that makes total sense. They may be thinking, because we're about ready to get rid of you.
Yeah, well, in real life, though, that's like going up to a parrot and going, and then as soon as you take your finger out, it squawks. Because I mean, Hegseth, I mean, he's totally pathological. By the way, that's an example right there, right? That Hegseth, he's I think he's a Gemini, but he has a lot of Virgo in his chart. But he's not using the Virgo in the same way, right? This is where
Right.
people can get confused. Like you do certain parts of your chart more, or you channel some part of the archetype in a different way. And that's why people will get confused. I saw a comment on my channel that the person said, I've never met a Virgo who wasn't in it for himself type thing. Well,
Yeah.
by the way, okay, do the numbers. Right now, the world, the 9 billion people, right, living on planet Earth, that means that almost a billion, like about 800 billion, I mean million, 800 million people, right, like almost 3 US populations have to be Virgo just by, the averages, right? Because every 12th person,
Right.
once you have a lot of people, it's going to be roughly approximately like that, right? So
Right.
there are many, many, many expressions of that, and you have to figure out, how it's coming through. But the thing with Virgo would be, say, all Virgos, for instance, it's true that you see some of these like qualities, like they love. That's why purification. Virgos like to purify things, and so they often like cleansing, cleaning, that kind of thing. That
Yeah.
show up a
And
lot with Virgos.
they do hate unfairness.
Yeah, because Virgo at heart and it's in the American chart. It explains why the U.S. is already 250 years old, and it's the longest living democracy because Neptune is the idea of all the people, include everyone. It's DEI, for example, diversity and
Right.
inclusion. That's the whole idea, and it's the idea, for example, of the common worker, bringing in everyone into the fold. And so the Pope represents that in spades. It's a really good way to do it. Now it's less than like Francis Sagittarius. That's a lot. That can be more vocal and say because fiery. It's a fiery energy. So then you say
Yeah.
things. Oh, that's just really stupid, and then you provoke a bigger argument. This guy that way is probably more diplomatic. And what I noticed is that he has strong stress with Trump, but he has his talking planet aligns really well with Trump's Jupiter, so he'll probably figure out a way to be diplomatic and stay out of major trouble, because
Yeah,
otherwise, then you can step on your own message. Yeah.
yeah.
But bottom
Hey,
line,
someone sent a question. The Pope's Pluto sits on the orange natal Mars and Pope's Sun,
mhm.
and Venus and Virgo square the orange Sun, North Node, Uranus and Gemini, and his moon, South Node in Sag. What kind of effect will these contacts have on their relationship?
Okay, well, that I talked about in yesterday's video. The Venus, Virgo, and the Sun and Mars, and I think it's the Sun Venus that are most relevant, because the Sun Venus are a direct challenge. That just tells you the Pope's values are at odds with Trump's. Big news. I mean, that would be totally obvious, but that's going to mean resistance from there, right? The Pluto is on the right on his Mars ascendant. That's like the impulse to destroy something, to change something. It rebukes, it attacks, and Pluto's very powerful that way. So it's like the Pope being this like collective voice that Trump isn't going to like. He's representing the big picture, right? And so,
Right.
yeah, those are really challenging energies. The nodes, they're kind of part of the mix, but the key really is the sun. The sun, you put the sun in those degrees in Virgo, it's a direct challenge. Same like how with Pope Francis, it was from the bottom of the chart, right? In Trump, same idea. He was challenging him as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, exactly.
So, uh, somebody was saying, will he be an advocate for women? I think it'll take a couple of years. I think it's really hard for him. If it was just him in charge, which he is, he could do it easily. But I feel like some of those oldies but goodies in there really would make it hard.
Yeah, although you can be encouraged by the fact that the news reports that say that Francis appointed 80% of the cardinals that chose him. So that means there are a lot of cardinals there that are going to be reasonably like-minded. And, this is the thing about world periods like this, when you see not just one country, but the whole situation is turbulent, that's when big changes can take place, and that would be one such thing. Because if you think about the papacy and the Pope and the Catholic Church, they used to be really, really powerful. If you go back in history, they could overcome kings, and I mean, it took a long time before kings and governments started to ignore them more. And so if they want to return to having lots and lots of influence, the most obvious way is you don't want to push women away. You have to include them more. And they have. It's improved some, because I hadn't been at I was born Catholic, but I hadn't been in a mass for quite a few years. And then a few years ago, and I haven't since either. So I'm not telling you that I've reconverted or anything. Don't get any ideas. But I went to a mass, and I was impressed with how there were all these women part of the mass. But I noticed, I said to my wife, notice that they have a male guy leading all the women. They're still doing the same trip,
They
right?
still have
Why
to,
do you have to do? I mean, get into the 21st century, for God's sake. No pun
Oh, I
intended.
know. They told women they couldn't use birth control. So many women in my life, girlfriends that had families with 10 kids, they wanted that. They wanted more little Catholics running around.
Yeah, and there was a time when you could like the post-war years, baby boomers, and that whole period when Roosevelt set off the New Deal, there was enough money for a family to raise several children and still go on vacation. And the reason was why? Because the tax structure was more fair. It was set up so that you weren't going to get all these billionaires, with way too much money. And then when they get a lot of money, what do? Then they start trying to run the government. Musk has this idea in his head, because I made a lot of money, I understand the world. No, not really. You just, the system that someone else set up enabled you to, amass all this wealth. But it's not a good way to run this. But that's another big pattern that we're going through, which I see it switching. Because like people talk Pluto and Aquarius. Pluto and Aquarius is not a fascist sign. Aquarius is the sign of the people, right? It's trying to tilt in that direction. We're at the end of the 40 years of the Reagan's revolution, if you want to call it that, is what led to this inequality today. Because he was the one that really cut taxes to make it possible for these people to accrue way too much money. And also, you know what they did then that has really damaged the system is they loosened the media laws so that that's what enabled Fox to rise, because there were laws that you couldn't just make up BS, right?
Stories, yeah.
But notice what's happening, and I don't know if you've looked into this. What do your guides say about this? Because what happens if Murdoch cannot pass it on to his right-wing children, and it looks like he can't. He's
You
trying.
can't. They already voted against it.
Okay, but if that doesn't happen, it's going to be hard to bring in a replacement for Fox, because that's what's done it, right? See, they now, like I saw this other thing that's very curious. They're saying, well, why are these judges, they were electing Republican judges, like the Republicans would put in a judge, but then the media, because they call the media left wing, the media would just point out, look what you just decided. I mean, that seems unfair. So then they started to become more centrist, right? But then what they did is they created the Federalist Society in places like Fox News so they could praise them and say, oh, this guy's a really good judge. And so now, separate media organizations, now you can have, right, this way of doing things. But if that can be pushed back against, it'll help a lot, to have more fair.
Well, I see Murdoch going, and I see Fox News gone after he dies.
There you go. That could be extremely helpful. Yeah.
Did you get a lot of people asking you about the president habeas corpus?
No, habeas corpus hasn't come up other than in the news.
Well, Steve Miller was out there saying that he's going to suspend habeas corpus, the president. And I told you, I don't even think he knows what that means.
No, he definitely doesn't. But I think he knows instinctively. That's what he wants to do. He wants to be able to say, I know what's best. I can just do something.
I don't see him being able to do it. So I just looked it up on the chat thing. The President of the United States does not have the unilateral power to suspend habeas corpus. According to Article 1, Section 9 of the U.S. Constitution, the suspension of habeas corpus is allowed when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. He won't be able to come up with any. He'll lie about something like that, but I see even the Supreme Court getting in on it. However, there is a historical precedent for a president attempting to suspend it. Abraham Lincoln did so during the Civil War without initial congressional approval, urging it was necessary for national security. This action was highly controversial and led to the Supreme Court case Ex parte Merriman, where it could be ruled that only Congress can suspend habeas corpus.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That's the talk, is that he can't do it, because the Alien Act, that he's using, like he's making it up, because there's no war, there's no invasion. And so now here's the thing though, we have to prepare for this, because if you think about the situation, right, he's setting up, which if he hadn't, maybe this would have been less likely, but he set up this economic problem all by himself. He stepped in it, touches the rail. Now there are going to be problems. So one of the things he always does is he starts a fire somewhere else to distract you from what is really happening. So it is very possible that at some point there's going to be a crisis, probably later this year, because later this year the planets come back into Pisces and challenge him again. Things will probably be going really badly. And then he can try to take on the courts, right, to force them to let him do something that he wants to do. I don't think it's going to succeed, and especially as we go into the next year, like the one big flashing light in this chart is that the Saturn going into the legal house for like 26, 27, 28, almost 2.5 years in that house. That's where you get blocked in your legal initiatives. That's not when you succeed doing them, especially not when they're goofy like this, when he's trying to be so blatantly, inventive, like to say, I can just do whatever I want, or pretend that he hasn't heard the Supreme Court when they said you have to facilitate the return, right? And not even trying.
Right.
They're saying, well, yeah, but they also said, that they used that was a bit of a helping hand they threw at him, right? But they've been the things that I've heard from Roberts more recently, he seems worried about losing his power. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, they
because
sued him. Trump sued him. He sued the Chief Justice for something. And it's just like Roberts knows that was a stupid move. He did it to himself, giving him saying, well, actually he has power. No, he doesn't.
yeah, suing the Supreme Court justice is like, what is that like? Is that like putting a
It's
curse
like,
on the?
why would he do that? It's the stupidest thing. Like suing your mother when she's on her way to the store to get you something to eat.
Yeah, it's very unlikely to work, but yeah, I mean, this is the thing though. The thing is, I think what drives people crazy is that they will say, "Well, how can this be happening? How can we be in this situation?" The world goes through these periods sometimes. It just does, right? I mean, you have to imagine. Can you imagine if you look through a history book and someone tells you, "Look, there was this period here, and then the world went to this other place." You go, yeah, okay, that's cool, because you, in your mind, you lessen the importance. Imagine living there at that time, how stressful that would have been, and how
Oh,
you'd be anxious because you'd be thinking, where is this going to end up? Are we all going to be incarcerated? What's going to happen? Then the situation can improve. And to me, this is one of those periods, and it's dicey in the middle. But I think we have to be thankful that, this is for sure. I remember that I was saying this going back 2, 3 years, and I should have listened to my own what I was saying more, because I kept saying, "Hey, these are the Civil War planets." Well, we're in the Civil War. It's just not a hot Civil War, but it is a Civil War right now in this
definitely.
country. Both sides hate each other. It is very difficult. Like, how do you talk to a MAGA person? And they would probably say, like, how do I talk to you with your liberal,
But the good news is a lot of the MAGA people are losing their jobs. The truckers are losing their jobs.
yeah,
This is hitting home.
exactly. And that's really how the system works. That you need that. All you need is 5% to go, don't like this. That's it. Then it
All
shifts,
you
right?
need.
That's it. You can't be thinking, I'm going to reach a point here where everybody rejects this guy. There's no way. They're not. Look in history. There have been plenty of people that got support, and they were horrible people. And
Right.
like Spiro Agnew, that crook that was with.
And a lot of people loved him.
Oh yeah, I saw these rallies with women cheering and signs, and I'm thinking, are you people crazy?
Trump will still have that.
He used to wait in the White House for money in envelopes,
Yep.
literally. Like, they'd come in and say, "Here, here's the
Yeah.
here's the bribe," right? So
And all
exactly,
those women with those signs, Trump can grab my private area anytime.
yeah.
Hey, listen, I got to give you some news. I just posted on my posts, the community channel. Conservative school board was voted out of office on Saturday and replaced with liberal challengers, including the school board president. Voter turnout was low, but those who did show up sent a clear message to Republicans across the country.
Where was
And the
that?
people, the people who stayed home also sent a very strong message. If Republicans can't even keep majorities in places like deep red Texas, they are in serious trouble. This was posted on one of the social medias, but I don't know which one. I'll look it up.
So it was Texas, though.
Texas. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, and that's the thing. That's another thing that to me it's very encouraging that, because right now the what you keep hearing is, the Republicans, look, they're doing it wrong, but no one likes the Democrats. Democrats are terrible. It's normal. It's only 100 days. You gotta let it pass. But the
Yes.
elections tell you, right? The fact that that just happened, that first of all, voters do this a lot. It's very frustrating. They get a result and then they don't show up anymore. They think that's it, right? That's why the thing
Right.
keeps switching. So they're not even bothering to show up. But
Yep.
I'm telling you, what's going to happen here is you're going to see election after election going to the Democrats, and that's what you got to pay attention to, because then that's what counts when it comes to if you actually want to switch.
Yeah, and even the ones that are on the fence, well, I'm really disappointed in him. What they'll do is they'll just won't show up
Right,
because
right.
they don't have the stomach to vote for Democrats, so they just won't show up.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And you're totally right. If it's happening in Texas, Kentucky, Kansas, it's a much bigger sign than if it's happening in whatever, Washington State.
So, real quick before we go, what do you think about Pakistan and India? I never felt a huge war. They've come to an agreement, a ceasefire, But this has been back and forth forever. But I don't see a big, there's something to do with some sort of terrorist action coming in from Pakistan.
Yeah. Well, the thing with these conflicts, remember that these two countries are both armed with nuclear weapons, right?
I know.
And in fact, Pakistan got their nuclear weapons because they were afraid of India. And this is where, one of the many ironies of life, right? That people think obviously nuclear weapons are the worst thing, but are they? Because maybe nuclear weapons, imagine if there were no nuclear weapons now anywhere. Countries would invade each other because whoever had the biggest army would say they can't stop us.
Yeah, heck
But
yeah,
if you know
yeah.
they're going to shoot a missile at you, you step back. So I'm sure India's thinking, if we get really, really tough, they could lose their nerve, and so they got to keep it within a limit. And so the only thing would be if a mistake is made, though, because that could happen too. You could get
Yeah.
errors. So there I'll go with you feel like no, there's no.
I could never, well, of course, the ETs are the one that told me there will be no nuclear war. But that's like Putin always threatening with nukes, always. But he knows he will be off that, or the North Korea guy too. He's hysterical. He's just a little midget. He would be taken off as fast as the bombs went up.
Yeah, no, and I mean nuclear war. You can't. That's why Macron came out and he said, "I'm going to defend Europe because France has nuclear weapons." You don't need a lot of nuclear weapons. You just need
No,
one.
right?
You just need one. I mean, it is crazy to say we're gonna like in Russia in the news they would carry stories saying we should be attacking Britain with nuclear weapons, and I was thinking, are you out of your mind? That is not a plan that will win you. That if you want to die, yes, then you can do that.
Yeah.
And, then everybody goes down. So, yes, it's a lot of bluster, and but yeah, like you said, in India and Pakistan, and again, isn't it amazing how so many parts of the world, people that to someone looking from the outside, we think, but you guys are kind of the same, aren't you? Muslim, Hindu, they don't think that, or Shias
No, I
and
know. I
Shias
know.
and or even, like look in America now. What's the thing that is making this so tense? But I think here though the similarity to the Civil War of the 1860s, it's the exact same thing. It's the white supremacy nonsense. The idea that that's what happened back then. Now I'll tell you something I heard that really bothered me because I missed it. I mean, I should have paid attention. I think it was because at the time Obama was president, and so I didn't pay as much importance. Roberts, remember when they took down the Voting Rights Act?
Yes.
Scalia was still alive, right? And they took it down, which then right away the Republicans started to try to suppress votes and everything. And Roberts in his comment said that the Voting Rights Act was discriminating against the Confederacy. That's really bad. That is
Oh
awful.
my
That's like a
God.
direct thing to say. Like, how can you even say that? That's agreeing with what they were doing. I mean, they're always trying to hide the fact that they'll say, well, no, the Civil War was not about slavery. Well, then what was it about?
Oh my God. I
What was it
watched
about?
that biography of General Grant again. And it's just so hard. He tried so hard to stop the KKK. He got the military, and then everybody was mad because the military was trying to stop the white men against white men. And then there was like 100 years where nothing was done. And all those wonderful Black citizens, mayors, senators, all that, they were lynching them,
I know. And in a sense, I mean,
killing
now
them.
now it's a different flavor, but it's the same
The
idea. They've got
same.
this thing. So, I mean, look at Trump is on the trail during the campaigns talking about his beautiful white body. And I thought, well, like, you're not signaling too much or anything, like, because that's pretty farcical to
Show
say
us your
something.
mushroom pee-pee. Jesus
Yeah.
Christ.
But then that's the thing, right? They're like the echoes of this underbelly thing that rises up and then it has to be, rejected. And by the way, the best way to reject this is to see it in action, like that's where it's good that he's not being held back. Because if you let him actually try to run things, he doesn't know how. This guy is not a good manager. He will always figure out a way to screw it up, which is like what he did with COVID, by the way. Once there was something important, then he was worried about testing instead of actually solving the problem, right? So
You know, you were talking about, it's a good thing the nukes. I was just thinking, just last night, I watched this on Netflix, a show about the Blitz in the UK. Well, that was horrible. Germany hit them all those days. All those people died. And they lived, it got for a while that they didn't even pay attention to it. They were so used to the bombing. They would hit downtown London, they would hit railroads. And, if they had nukes, that wouldn't have been the case.
No, no. And even, and, that's another, in a way, totally separate arena, but Hitler's big mistake is like Trump's big mistake. Hitler, Napoleon did this too. This is people that have this kind of mentality. They think they're really smart. The opening too many fronts, right? And Trump is
Yeah.
going. That's dangerous because then you lose control, right? It's too
Right.
much.
Well, when he was doing the Blitz and the UK stood their ground, you got to say they were pretty strong people back in those days.
Yeah,
And they
yeah,
refused. They were not, if it was citizen against a soldier, they would have done it. And they were so hard to break that Hitler turned around and announced he was going to hit Russia next. And that was the end for him, was Russia.
yeah. By the way, speaking of that, really quickly, uh, the Russia conflict with Ukraine. The key for Ukraine is they have to figure out how to survive about another year or less, a little less. They just got to get to next spring because once Saturn and Neptune are fully in Aries, which happens next year, that's when the Putinism starts to be in big trouble. And it looks to me like it's almost certain to go that way because they'll probably be able to get there somehow. Because whenever I hear that war, Trump is for it, he's against it, but then they send more money, and then
Yeah.
Europe steps in. So I don't think Russia will have enough, to be able to overtake
Well, that
Ukraine.
guy from inside Russia that I joined his Patreon account, and he talks about they got no money there. They're going into stores and gyms and removing the young men out to fight. They're so desperate, and apparently the train stations are full. People are desperately trying to get out of Russia.
Yeah, yeah. Well, not surprised. I mean, that's the thing that, in contrast to when Stalin used to send everyone into war, they couldn't check the internet to see what was really happening.
Yeah,
But now they kind of go, wait a minute,
yeah,
you
yeah.
go. How about you go and fight?
There you go. Well, what are you guys doing tomorrow for Mother's Day?
Uh,
Is this your first year without your mom?
it is, yeah. I miss my mom because I used to, talk with her regularly, and yeah, it was, and she was really following the politics too. We'd have these long discussions. She didn't
Oh,
like
I
she
bet
didn't
she
like Trump.
loved it.
She did not like Trump at all, not one bit. We had a few cursing sessions. Yeah, it's true.
Well, I'm not doing nothing. I'm just chillaxing, hanging out
Yeah, I don't think
on
I
my
think
garden.
yeah, same here. We're not There's no big plan or anything. Just enjoy the day.
Yeah.
All right, that was fun as
Thank you, my
always.
friend.
Look forward to the next one, and we'll say goodbye to everyone. Bye for now.
Bye for now. Cheers.